Welcome back to the Battle of Hall's Ferry. After Cold Harbor, we had a lot of extra snipers available, so I have increased the size of all of these units. I do have one 2-star unit that is using JF Browns. They're not nearly as good as the Whitworths due to the drop-off at max range, but they'll still work. Taking in very little infantry and mostly going to be bringing in artillery. You can see I've brought in some new units. And here's my primary artillery corps, which is actually going with an artillery general. This is pretty standard, though I've moved up some of my 10-pound Parrot units to 14. I'm also bringing one sniper and the scout unit in with the 1st Corps, so I can have something to see. So basically, we're bringing in nothing but artillery initially, and then we're going to bring in a little bit of infantry to clean up at the end. But primarily, this is going to be a all artillery and sniper battle. So, in this battle, you're almost always facing mostly shorter range enemy cannon. Usually 24-pounders, 12-pounders, that sort of thing. The strategy has to change a little bit if you end up facing anything with longer range, but as far as I can tell, this battle is sort of set up such that the expectation is you just sort of be trying to crush your way through all of the fortifications with infantry, so they put a whole bunch of close-range artillery in there. I think it's also helped by the 24-pounder is at the top of the, scaling chain of what weapons can go to for the AI. So since we have very high weapons at the moment, that's what we're going to be facing. In this case, it's very convenient because it means we can afford to just set our artillery out in the open and slowly move them up and just destroy everything. So I've brought my scout unit over to see the first artillery piece, and we're just going to start getting rid of that. And the snipers are moving over to the side, and we're going to start pushing, trying to roll up their line from the left. And we're going to slowly start pushing up to the 2 left victory points, and then we'll reset up and push in to take the right victory point. The goal is to, in almost all situations, not actually have to do anything with the infantry at all. It's just to have the artillery take care of it. If we had access to more supply, we could skip the infantry entirely, but you don't have quite that much time. Once your artillery starts running out of ammunition, it takes too long. But you can see the first one's going down pretty quick. I wanted to note I've tried something different with the audio this time around. Been trying to figure out a way to accelerate these battles where there's not a whole lot going on, but not have every charge sound like a bunch of seagulls screaming. Let me know if this is an improvement. It seems a little better in some ways, but let me know what you think. So you can see I've moved up the snipers, and now I have a line on the second set of artillery. And the other nice thing about this map is all of the artillery is in the little rectangular fortifications, so you basically know exactly where they all are. Screw up, move the scout unit a little too far forward. That unit's going to take casualties, but it does its job, and it's not that big a deal. I could drop it down to 2-star easily and not really see any change in functionality. But again, you know where all the artillery is, and since you know about the range of your own 24-pound howitzers, you basically know exactly how far you can move the artillery up every time. So you just have to move from position to position and knock it out, and then you can move up to the next set. And I mostly try and have the long-range artillery working on enemy artillery if I can see it, and then the 24-pounders move up to actually blow units out of the fortifications. You will see infantry come up every now and again. I have enough artillery that usually it will deal with it. Gets a little close sometimes, but once we get a few more snipers on the field, then you'll have enough concentrated fire that any unit comes forward and they'll just get routed like this. And again, because we're outside of the range of their artillery, it just doesn't matter that our units are revealed. We can just afford to sit out in the open it's pretty unusual. The AI I would call relatively passive in this battle. It sort of just wants to sit in the fortifications and seems to expect that you're just going to be charging at it the entire time. So we can take advantage of that and, win this battle almost for free. I do turn the 24 pounders off at various times throughout the battle. You can just let them fire, but in a lot of cases, once they get to like 3/4 range or more, they're not doing very much. So I just try and save the supply a little bit. You could probably do more. The other thing we're seeing here is, we're seeing artillery units that are exhausted. That's going to be one of the problems in this battle. Is there is some rolling terrain down where you start out, and a lot of times when you click with that sort of terrain, when you give attack orders to artillery that's out of range, they seem to glitch out and they get stuck in a state where they're not moving, but they're still draining stamina. Like even if they're in range, if they move to in range, they'll just sit there and you can see the reload function just isn't moving. So you have to move. The way you break that is you give them an actual manual move order to somewhere else, and then that status goes away. But you'll see that come up multiple times throughout this battle. It's pretty annoying, but not much you can do about it. And thankfully, it really only comes up in these sort of scenarios where you're inching your artillery forward and doing everything with your artillery. Like if in most battles, it's just not a problem. So we've got our second corps coming in. This infantry is still going to be sitting around. Most of it is actually fairly fresh. This is mostly a chance for them to gain experience because they don't have to do a whole lot. They are almost exclusively armed with Enfields. I bought the armory out in preparation for Washington, so I decided that I was going to bring in some fresh units. I didn't really want to go in with muskets because they do need to do a little bit of fighting, and what they do have to do is in the trees, and it's not a situation where you can just charge. Well, with the infantry I bring in, at least you could probably do it if you brought more. You can see I misjudged a little bit the distance with some of that artillery, so I take a few losses. But again, all the enemy artillery is pretty weak, so at very long range, so I don't take very many losses, even if I do screw up. So going back to the infantry briefly, mostly it's all my 1-star units, trying to gain them some experience for the battles ahead, and I decided to give them all Enfields to, give them a decent punch when they do need to go into combat. I'm going to be spending a whole lot more money than I normally do just because we're coming up to the last 2 battles, so there's no point in having any of it left, so I'm probably going to be buying out the majority of the armory. These fortifications are alright for the 24 pounders. They sort of give you a really nice arc, and I use them briefly. They're not positioned great, so you can't use them for too long. So now that I've got the snipers up, I'm just going to start a line on the left and start pushing forward. We've gotten rid of the first 3 units of artillery, so we can start to move stuff up. You definitely do want to try and keep all of your long-range artillery moving up to optimal ranges as well, just because it maximizes the effect of their supply. The other thing worth talking about is while I moved a lot of my artillery units up to 14 guns, which is, in the base game, would be the maximum possible damage, so that's as far as I'm going to go. You could certainly go higher if you were using the UI mod and wanted to show off. Well, if you wanted to play completely optimal with the UI mod, you could do that. I just sort of wanted to stay consistent with what you would do in the base game, so it could sort of be used as a dual reference in that way. But I didn't move all of them up to 14 just because there's a few more 20-pounder units that I want to switch over from having the stealth perk at level 2 to having the accuracy perk, and I'm never going to have enough 20-pounders to be able to completely up all those units to 14. So I took a guess at what I was going to have access to and sort of went from there. So, as you can see, just slowly pushing up on the left, starting to push up on the right. We've got access to yet another artillery unit, so retargeting everything onto that. And just letting the snipers go up. Something that's worth talking about with supply, I sort of keep it moving back and forth as long as I can until I run out. There are multiple supply points that you can capture from the AI, which seem to have a very large distribution radius, so you can sort of refill from that as well as you get them. If you get a little luckier, you can capture multiple supply wagons from the AI. As you can see, I've done some damage to those already. You really want them to retreat towards the northwest, and this time they seem to have keep going northeast, so I'm not going to be able to really get too many of them. It's a little annoying, but it's only an extra 5,000 and wouldn't do a whole lot in terms of the artillery. One thing I do try and do is I try and keep an eye on my supplies, and then once I only have a few thousand left in one of the wagons, then I turn it on to infantry only and use it to just keep the snipers firing at full speed. Probably not necessary, but it speeds things up a little bit. So if you can manage to pull that off, that helps. But you can see, even in these relatively good fortifications, with this much good artillery, you can just melt your way through it. Don't think I've mentioned it yet. The timer is not something you really need to pay attention to. You actually have until 1800. So you have plenty of time to just move up real slow, and there's absolutely no reason to rush these first 2 points. Like, you should take almost 0 casualties taking both of those. Getting the last one is a little harder just because there's quite a few units up there. They are in good cover, and the vision's a little harder to acquire. So clearing out the right side entirely is rather difficult. So in that case, that's the right side is why I mostly have infantry. It accelerates the process so much. If you can just send some infantry in there, you're going to take some casualties doing it, but we're going to be able to minimize it pretty heavily by removing almost all of the artillery before we have to go in there. So moving these skirmishers up now to try and force the supply wagons back. I want them to get out of the way so that my snipers can hit things. That doesn't work particularly well. I'm not sure if I should have pushed harder. I don't know. They just seem to want to sit along the front line more, and when I've played this battle other times, they seem to like to go cluster into the north more, and when they do that, it's much easier to go capture them once you've pushed that far. You can see I'm mostly staying away from the right side. That's because, so you see the road that's going along through the Southern Union victory point. That road is sort of the line of where the enemy artillery can hit you from. So you can bring hidden units up past that, but you can't bring artillery out in the open there. Moving the infantry up a little bit, I'm not too worried about keeping it directly on top of the artillery. I just sort of want it in position where if the AI does suddenly become aggressive, that I have something in position to cover my artillery if I really need it. Just moving all the artillery up again. So we've basically taken the first stage. We'll be able to get the victory point shortly. Again, just trying to push out the supply wagons so that they aren't getting hit by stuff. This next phase gets a little tricky, you don't have a lot of good cover to work with, and now because you've pushed all these units out of the fortifications, you're going to have units that are walking back and forth a lot, so you do have to be a little careful with where you put your snipers, especially around the fortifications. Like where Logan is at the moment. That fortification the AI likes running back into, so you need to be aware and have enough firepower to either knock them out or retreat your snipers if you're within infantry range of that, because if you do, even if you're hidden, when that guy comes back forward into that fortification, he's going to reveal your units, and then there's a bunch of artillery that's going to be able to hit you. Also, around where Lee is in the top left, there are a couple Union skirmisher units that you have to watch out for. There's also some cavalry back there. Again, they're pretty passive, but it means you have to be a little careful with moving your snipers forward. Skirmishers are armed with short-range weapons. We don't have to deal with scoped rifles like we did at Cold Harbor. But they still have pretty good spotting, so we need to try and get rid of those before we push up too much. So we do take one volley on the snipers, but we have some infantry there to cover, so we'll be able to chase those units off and then set up again pretty quick. Getting rid of the artillery is also always complicated when they get the stealth perks. You have to get a lot closer to be able to see them. For example, right now you can see that by the left victory point, Williams does not have the stealth perk, so he's pretty easy to see. But the unit to his left, which I guess there's two units there, which we know are there. Those fortifications are occupied, but we are going to have to get much closer to be able to see those than we do if they don't have them. So it's not too big a deal, but just something to be aware of is sometimes you can see these units fairly easily, and sometimes you have to get up real close to be able to see them. So I have the scout unit on the right because I want to start revealing all the artillery on that side. Unfortunately, I take a lot of extra losses over there just because we have units that keep walking in. I don't know where they're going, but they just keep walking over that way, and then we get spotted, and then we take another. That's why we don't want to walk in there with infantry, just because that's a skirmisher unit with plus cover, sitting in heavy cover, and that's how much damage you take from a single artillery volley. So you really don't want to be walking in there with infantry if you can avoid it. And I don't really send snipers to the right just because they're all busy on the left, but I will send them over there later in the battle. So just checking my infantry or my artillery. Part of it is I'm looking for any units that are stuck in reloading, because that tells me that they aren't, that they have glitched out. Like, that's the easiest way to tell is, one is if exhausted starts flashing. Artillery should basically never be exhausted if it's not bugged out. Unless there's a couple scenarios where if it's heavy cover and it has to turn around a whole lot, it'll get exhausted, but otherwise it's almost always a glitch. So, making good progress. Field 3 artillery batteries. Shuffling everything forward again. It's going to be a whole lot of that. So, you can see I keep trying to slide the snipers up on the left. Still getting spotted, so eventually I'm just going to send some infantry up there to clear that out. But I want to try and get a little bit more of the enemy infantry cleared out of the western side before I do that. Sort of once that unit on the west goes, then about that time is when you can send them up. I also kind of want to get rid of that remaining artillery unit before you do that. So to discuss the JF Brown versus the Whitworth TS a little bit more, both weapons are excellent in the, out to like 400, 500 yards. But the Whitworth only drops off to like 30% at 600, whereas the JF Brown drops off to like 10%. Which means that, 10% is still enough to be useful. But if you can, you really want to try and get your Whitworths, you want to try and get your JF Browns up to around 500 yards if you can. Like, they're just going to perform a lot better if you can sneak them a little bit closer. So they're also going to benefit a whole lot from that extra 10% range from the sharpshooter perk. Just because, it extends the curve, so then you can, if you're shooting something at range 600, you're actually at like, 625, 650, something like that. So the curve's going to be a little more favorable to you. So if you can, you always want to use the Whitworth TS, but since we have the JF Browns, even with that drop off, they're going to be more effective than the standard Whitworth. So I'm using them on my 2-star unit. So you can see we've started to clear most of the stuff on the west. Spotted another artillery unit, cleared the first one on the right. It's worth noting there is, I think it's Ewing. There is an artillery unit sitting right into there. The flag for that unit tends to be hidden by the infantry flag, so it's pretty hard to target, but you can target it. I think it has a stealth perk this time around, so it's pretty hard to see, but we'll get it eventually. You can see like I'm moving the 14-pounder up, and it's only really safe because it's hidden. Otherwise it would be in range. So, making another attempt to try and get rid of the skirmishers. We've gotten rid of most of the artillery, so we're safer to be in the open now. And we're starting the infantry march up. Tried to see if I could get the wagon, perhaps. Didn't work, but we got that unit coming across in the water, so be able to beat it up. You can see that's a case where it tries to... I guess that's one of the other things is... So even when units hop into the fortifications, even if you rout them, they seem to have some leftover momentum trying to move forward. I'm wondering if maybe the routing move order happens from, like, it gets issued from, like, the position they would be in if they were actually in the fortification. So they tend to keep walking forward for a bit before walking back. So be aware of that with when using snipers. Even if you route the unit, you want to make sure you're far enough back that you aren't going to get revealed when this sort of momentum carries the routing unit forward before it goes back. Otherwise you can take some unnecessary artillery fire. But you can see we've only got one wagon in a position that we can probably capture. But we pushed out the skirmishers and there's not too much. There's one artillery unit left there, but it's about half strength, and there's an infantry unit, but we're going to be flanking it, so we're going to be able to get rid of it pretty easily. And I'm sending instead of sort of wrapping from the southwest, I'm going to let the snipers move into that position. I'm going to wrap from the northwest because there are going to be more infantry units up there, and if I go into the north more, then I'll be able to hit them from multiple sides and get them out. We really don't want to get stuck in a long firefight in these woods just because, we're fighting 3-star units that are larger than us with better weapons. When we're both in heavy cover is a recipe for taking a lot of losses. So I'm taking a lot of shots from that cavalry unit, but it's not doing too much. And now that we've got some units there, we're going to be able to push it out. So I'm just sending the skirmishers forward to make sure I get the wagon before it retreats too far. I was going to try and capture that one, but I think I moved the snipers forward and they decided to target it, so no luck there. Got some skirmishers coming across. Always good to get rid of those if we can, but we're still focused on trying to get rid of the artillery because skirmishers are annoying and the artillery is going to cause losses. So, got their skirmish unit trapped in the corner. It's not a duty I really want my snipers on, but they can sit there for a little while. I could detach skirmishers and replace them, but sort of focused on other things at the moment, so just having the infantry move to where it needs to go. But you can see we're going to be able to push them out of this fort now pretty easily. We've taken, what, a couple hundred losses at most at this point in the battle? If we somehow had double the amount of supply, we could set up, again, do the exact same thing to the fort on the right, and probably win this battle with sub 1,000 losses or something like that. But the game doesn't let us get away with that. What we're getting away with is already pretty ridiculous. So I did send some detached skirmishers to the northwest. I just want to get rid of that a little bit faster and make sure they don't squeeze out or something. Time to move all the artillery up again. You do, so when you move up towards the river line, once you've occupied the left victory point, you do tend to get the AI walking back across to get over to you, but you can see it's really favorable terrain for them to be attacking. You know, right now it's not great because they're in the woods, but once we push them out of there, then they're going to be in open terrain or water, and it'd be a great defensive position. And in the same way, we don't really want to attack across that point because, you know, if we go across, then we're in the exact same scenario where we'd be walking across river, and they'd be sitting in heavy cover, and we have to try and walk uphill to push them out. So I don't really like attacking from that side too much until I've cleared everything out. You run into a similar problem trying to attack from the northwest. There's a second redoubt in the northeast of the map that has several artillery units in it, and it's very hard to get vision on. And even if you can get vision on it, then you have to get units in range of it, which you can do from the northwest, but it's a lot of moving, and I don't think it's worthwhile compared to what I'm going to do, which is set up and cross in the southwest. Because I have all my artillery there already, I can flank all the trenches down there, and from that position I can just shove basically everything out, cross the river without being under fire, and then we're going to have a little bit of a firefight to actually push up to the flag. But I think that's the most efficient way to do it. I've also tried wrapping along the eastern board edge before, and that works all right. I think when I did this infantry heavy the last time around, I sort of took the left the way I'm doing at the moment, just with a little more infantry involvement, and then I sort of did the same thing and slid units up along the eastern edge of the map, and then I think I took the northern redoubt from both sides. I think it would work. Just gonna take more losses doing it, just because, you know, most of what we're doing right now is free. We take some artillery losses now and again, we take some scout losses now and again, we take some sniper losses now and again. You know, we're losing some infantry now that they're actually engaged, but those exchanges are pretty favorable. But if you actually start trying to push in with infantry, then you're gonna, you know, the losses are obviously gonna go up. That sniper unit on the island is sort of safe. You do got to be careful, as units will wander over there, and every now and then, I'm not sure what triggers it. Sometimes their cavalry just decides, hey, I'm going to go look for something, even though they don't have vision of it, and that tends to get snipers or scout units killed. But normally, you're pretty safe to sit there. So I want to get into the farms to the right of those snipers, so I'm going to start hitting that unit in the flank to try and get rid of it. Oh, there's one of the random skirmisher and cavalry charges. Now we're going to take, we're going to take pretty heavy losses on the scout unit, which is unfortunate, but, well, you know, even if we need to spend like 5,000 to replace them and keep the third star, which you don't really need, it's just nice for cover, and these units inevitably get seen, so you take a little bit better losses if you have the cover perk, but you don't really need it. At this point, I think I should already be shifting some 24-pounders north. I was expecting them to come across the middle of the map a little bit more, but they're coming in the north a little heavier than they sometimes do. And if I had a couple of 24-pounders up there, those exchanges would be even more favorable. And we've got a lot of 24-pounders sitting around, not really doing much at the moment. So they aren't needed elsewhere, so they should be moving north. I think it takes me a little too long to adjust to that. I think that was the first officer I think we lost. So. Yeah, we got a couple 24-pounders units sitting behind this infantry right now. We'd be in fantastic shape. So shifting the line north, I want to, as I see that unit start to waver, I want to get him out of the line. Realize I probably should have had my cover general up there as well. he would have helped a little bit. Definitely some more things to, you could definitely be more on top of this battle. But we're talking, do you get out of this with a few hundred extra men maybe? We're gonna, as you can see, we've taken almost no losses in the grand scheme of things. Considering this is a battle of, what, 20,000 versus 60,000, something like that. And we've taken maybe 1,000 losses up to this point. Doing alright. So, just shifting all the artillery up again. North is stabilized, and we've got some 24-pounders up there, so if they come back, we'll be able to deal with that scenario pretty easily. I think that artillery unit is still there, which, yeah, so it must have definitely has the stealth perk. So getting rid of that is definitely a priority. Because once we get that, then we have access to start moving across the river and stuff. So we've still got, what, 3.5 hours remaining, so again, no need to rush. I kind of like to, with about an hour left is when I usually start looking to try and get infantry across the river. So I take some extra sniper losses because that stealth artillery unit that I just can't see. And maybe I should have pushed the unit on the right up instead of the unit on the left, because it would have had an easier time to retreat into cover, and I might have avoided some losses doing that. But you can see we've mostly beaten up a lot of their infantry. You could try and hide everything on the west side of the map, but I kind of like to have it in the open because that leads enemy units to start coming back over. And the more you can destroy these units up here, the easier your time is going to be taking the victory point down in the south, just because those free units will all come over to you and then you're stuck slocking through the woods against them. So if you can get rid of them, it also opens up the option of just walking across the river for free in the west, and then you can, flank the entire position and get rid of it pretty easily. So that stealth artillery unit still being rather annoying. Finally pushed out the infantry. So I'm going across with the scouts now to just really, we still have time, but I really want to get rid of that artillery, and once we get rid of it, then we can cross with everything else. You can see there's definitely some vision holes up in this area where units just disappear for no explicable reason. You can see we almost have established bridgehead across the river at this point. Could probably start bringing infantry, but don't quite need to yet. Really want to get rid of those last 2 artillery batteries before I move, because I think the infantry gets spotted as soon as it goes across. And now I can start bringing the 24-pounders up as well, because I've cleared enough out so they can get into range. Gonna lose even more units from that because of that fortification. I'm not really sure what I should have done here. I guess I could have kept the units back further. Maybe I just should have sent infantry in to occupy that position. Really not sure. It's just sort of a weird spot where you can't. Maybe if I brought more snipers further to the left, then I could have flanked those units as they start walking up, but you tend not to have vision of them when they start coming in, so I don't know. They really want to keep a unit there, and it really messes with my ability to move snipers into the area. The other option is I could move those 2 infantry units forward and just push out that Massachusetts unit and just take control of the area that way. That probably would have been... I think that would have worked. That probably would have been a better idea than what I'm doing. So, another example of a vision hole where, you know, there's no good reason you can't see that unit, but now he's finally got vision on it, so the artillery will take care of it pretty quick. Bring the captured supply wagon. I think in this case I screwed up and didn't leave any extra supply in my wagons, so I just set their wagon to infantry only and use it to refill the snipers. I think the snipers are a better investment because that 5,000 supply will keep them going for pretty much the rest of the battle, whereas it would vanish into the artillery instantly, and I don't think it would get you as much benefit. So I see that artillery unit that I think I routed from further south come over, and I try and get rid of it, but I need to get that unit supply in some way. It doesn't do enough damage fast enough without it to really deal with that artillery unit. And at this point, because I know that unit's there, I should be moving back 14-2 rifle and those 24-pounders so they aren't taking damage from it. I think I kind of expect the snipers to deal with the situation, and they just don't. So finally moving across the river with the infantry. Got about an hour left, so we want to make sure we have that flag. There is still 1 artillery unit sitting in there. I'm going to target everything on it, but we're going to take some losses from it. So now that we have the infantry there, we can push them out pretty quickly. We're going to have infantry in range. This has actually worked out pretty well. I've got my 1 musket unit in position. That's going to take the canister. And then once we get rid of that unit, then we're going to be pretty much set up to be able to take the flag. You can see we've cleared out pretty much everything on the west, so we're able to just walk units across there. And now we're starting to capture the flag. There we have it. I think at this point we could actually just click finish. I'm going to let it run out until 1800. I'm not sure. Probably not the best choice. You know, I think I'm in a pretty good position, but there's still several artillery units up there that I can't see, and we're not fighting in the best shape, and artillery isn't really in support range. So I should probably just hit finish here, but I'm not 100% positive if you have to wait for the contested to run down. I kind of feel like you do, but I'm not certain. But I decided this is going well enough that I'm just gonna leave it as is, and we'll just keep pushing these units out. I think when I was playing it, I kind of felt, okay, these units are all weak, we'll just be able to send the infantry in and we'll just clear all this out. But they actually hold pretty well. Which is probably reflective of I'm bringing, 1-star units versus 3-star units. So we've spotted that artillery up there, but all of my long-range artillery is out of range. I probably should have paused at this point and moved it all up so that I would be able to bring fire into this. But with only a few minutes left, I'm not sure if I could have gotten into position in time. I guess that would be the advantage. If you push harder with the infantry sooner, you could bring your following infantry, you could bring your artillery up and probably reduce this position in the north completely. Not sure if I don't think it really matters. You know, we're pretty close to it. So there you go. About 2,500 losses, so about 2,000 after medicine versus about almost 40,000. So that's close to a 20-to-1 ratio. Unsurprisingly, the artillery does well. We lost some snipers, but we still have plenty of replacements, and they'll be cheap to... We still have the rifles, so it's not a problem. And we have a couple of rifle units that took decent losses. And I think Griffiths is that unit that was in the north that I let shoot at my units in the open for a little bit. But other than that, we kept them very low, and then now, you know, the rest of the units never got to do anything. Plenty of promotions. Lost 2 major generals, but, you know, we have more than we'll ever need. And in return for the Enfields, we got a bunch more rifles, we got some more Spencers that we'll probably just sell. A few 61s. Still only been a few units with those, and a bunch of 24-pounders. No 20-pounders, which is unfortunate, but it also means that we didn't have to deal with clearing out 20-pounders and staying in cover and all that. So yeah, we just gained, what, 15,000 men? So for a battle that can be very expensive, you know, a lot of times you'll see people with 10, 15,000 casualties in this battle. You know, we just came out with a huge bonus in manpower, so I think we're going to be looking at being able to field something like 120,000 at Washington, unless I completely screw up the next battle or something. So pretty standard reinforcements. I think armory and training went up slightly, but we're reaching the point where those values just aren't going to go up much more. You know, they're all 3-star. They're all pretty much on the best weapons. Hopefully that didn't push them over into... Well, we were probably already at the point of having scoped rifles. I don't know why we didn't face them in the last one, but... So most of these units, a lot of these units were already 3-star, but we made some pretty good progress on the newer units. We got 2 stars on all of the 1-star brigades. So those guys will have a chance to get even more experience. For the next battle, we're going to set up very similarly. Your timing is a little tighter and the terrain is a little worse for you, so that'll be harder. Also, I'm pretty sure there's 20-pounders in the next battle, so that makes everything harder. But we should be able to get a lot more experience for the artillery again. Did manage to get that unit to 3 stars, but still doing pretty good. And really didn't take that battle losses on the infantry at all. Yeah, those guys didn't do quite as much, but the 24-pounders had trouble getting targets for most of the battle, so not that unsurprising. Okay, so not a lot happened in that battle. Just, you know, take your time and you can get through it with a excellent ratio. That was Hall's Ferry. Thanks for watching.